Welcome, Goddess, to this beautiful conversation for part of the launch of Soulpreneur. I am so grateful for you joining us. I have with me the most incredible goddess in my life, who is an absolutely integral part of this book coming to life, the one, the only, Kerryn Hewson. Thank you so much, Kerryn, for coming and joining me today and taking part in this conversation that I know is just going to be so powerful and supportive for so many women out there who have got a story to tell and are feeling called towards something, whether that is a book, whether that is telling their story through social media, whether that is through audio format, because you are just someone who has so much vast experience. And I'm we've been talking behind the scenes about how excited we are to share this conversation and kind of our journey of how we came to start working together specifically in this book. Because for those of you who might not have caught up on the story of this book, we're going to talk a little bit more about that. But Kerryn has been my incredible editor behind the scenes, helping me, supporting me, bringing something to life in an even more magical way than I ever thought was possible at the start of this long and windy journey of writing this book. And I don't know about anyone else out there who has ever done something like this before or has had work of this nature put out in terms of the written word and needing that editing support. I knew that I needed to find the right person to be involved in this. So our story of how this came about is just so magical and has so many threads and notes around soulpreneurship that we keep having kind of laughs behind the scenes, don't we, Kerryn, about it's so ironic that the book entitled Soulpreneur has been the soulpreneur journey for so many of us anyway, in real life.
Absolutely. I know. I'm really excited to share the magical divine story of how this came about for us, and also just how perfect it is. Like, we couldn't have dreamt this up if we tried. So yes, it's amazing. It's amazing. As you were speaking then, because I could so easily dive right into how this started for me, but when you were touching just then on, you had started this book journey already, and then there was this looming part of the process where it's editing needs to happen. I have to give my baby to somebody. So I would love to hear for myself, but also for everyone listening, sort of how were you feeling going through the process, knowing there was this thing that you hadn't, this piece that hadn't clicked into place yet?
Yeah, you're so right. It was this kind of looming thing that I hadn't given much attention to in terms of energy wise, because I was still very much in the doing of book writing at that particular point in time. And it kept kind of coming into my consciousness as, oh, well, that's something I can figure out later. I can figure that out later. I can figure that out later. And then at the times that I did start to think about it, I was like, I don't know where the fuck to even begin, because
Mm.
I want to find someone who understands the nature of what I'm writing about, that understands that soul essence of putting something together like this, that it is not your run-of-the-mill self-help book. It is not your run-of-the-mill kind of entrepreneurship, even if that has a spiritual leaning or a soul-led leaning. And also, it doesn't quite fit the category of someone writing their memoir or their kind of story, as in telling their story and maybe some teachable moments that come through from that. So I was very aware that I kind of had to hand over the trust to the universe and go, well, I'm just not going to worry about this. I'm not going to try and force it to happen. I'm not going to try and figure it out. I'm going to just trust that the right situation or opportunity or person is going to appear in my reality. And lo and behold, it was someone who was already one of my biz besties who we were already working together on a number of different levels. We've been in a mastermind space together. We've been in programs with each other, like within each other's programs. And, so we had a really beautiful ongoing dynamic and relationship. And so I'd love to hand over to you for your perspective of how things then kind of manifested in terms of your perspective, because for me it was just the most magical thing that dropped into my DMs one day. So
I know, it's so good. I'm really glad that we covered that first, because I think the way that this story is going to play out, it's so important that you did trust and you didn't try to work it out in advance, and you didn't make it be this big problem that had to be solved, because that could have been your experience. And I think that is the experience for a lot of people when we don't know how it's going to work, and we need to, you know, build that trust muscle within ourselves and with the universe. So from my perspective, what happened is, like you say, we were already in each other's worlds. And oh my God, the first time you shared that you were writing a book, I was just like, the energy in my body, and if I was just like, oh my God, I'm just gonna be the like biggest voyeur right now. For anyone listening, my background, my first side hustle, my first thing that was not of, you know, the corporate like traditional path, is writing. I think as soon as I was able to like learn how to write a sentence, as proven by my 7-year-old daughter who's doing the same, I swear I was writing stories. And right through my teenage years, right into my 20s, I was writing. I have a diploma in creative writing. There you go, that's a thing. And I pursued fiction writing, and I got a couple of small stories published and things. I wrote hundreds and hundreds of thousands of words over like years with these fiction stories. And it's like, I know what it's like to sit in that chair and write 500 words. Like, you see someone sitting down at their computer and they're like, look, I wrote 500 words. And I'm like, I have been you in that chair writing 500 words. So when I saw you sharing that on your stories, like, my whole body and energy lit up. Like, it connected me to that time of my life and that passion that I still clearly have. And I was just like, yes, 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 yes. So I was already like riveted to your journey and to your story, like as soon as you shared it, because I was like, I know this journey. This has been my journey. Like, I want this for you. I want you to experience how magical it is to really be devoted to something like that, and devoted to our own passion, and, you know, spend that time with it and go through that experience. So then, like, that's even before like much is happening. So that was my initial reaction to you sharing, and I'm just like, holy crap, something has been lit up. And then the more I saw you share about it, I was like, I have to read this book. I have to be the first person to read this book. I was like, this is what's going through my head every time you're sharing. I'm like, oh my God, I have to read this book. I wonder if she wants like advanced readers. I wonder if she knows what she's doing with editing. Like, I need to get my hands on this book. Like, this is like the energy, this is the like messages coming through. I'm just like, I need. So it had come to me a few times. And then finally I was like, I just need to message you about this. And so I replied in your DMs to one of your stories. And I think it was something along the lines of, oh my gosh, I would love to be involved and support you in any way I can. Do you need an advanced reader? Do you need anyone to look over for proofreading? I was just like, I throw myself at your feet. Let me get my hands on this book.
And for anyone who is watching along or listening along and knows a little bit about human design, we have been geeking out as well about how beautifully aligned this has been, because not only is Kerryn a sacral generator, responding away to all my shares and just me putting it out into the world, not knowing if anyone was watching, not knowing if anyone cared, still having my own internal kind of freakouts about calling myself an author, pivoting things in terms of where my energy was going in my business, dedicating myself to a book and going, oh my God, is anyone even going to be interested in reading this? And Kerryn's responding away over there.
Like, losing my
shares. And reaches out with an invitation for me as a projector, which was just so fucking perfectly aligned. And that just adds so many layers of it in my, I guess, feeling around this and how incredible and magical it has all felt, because it has been so aligned on so many levels. And for someone who knew not only me, but my business and my work and the energy behind what I was desiring to share, and also to have your incredible background of being the person who has written books and who has published and who has been through these processes, has just been so, it's just so perfect. And it's just, delicious energy to be in, and to have that just peace of mind knowing that you are able to bring all of you to this process and have awareness and, kind of a nuance around what is being written at the level that you're not just editing the words, you understand on that soul level what this is all about. And it is, in many ways so familiar to you, because it's very intertwined with the work that you do as well, in terms of your mentoring and your coaching spaces and your programs and things. So it does feel like it's a real beautiful kind of blossoming of something that neither of us expected,
For sure. And I remember actually around about the same time that I reached out to you, because this is how the universe worked. I had actually been reading a book called The Sound of Paper by Julia Cameron, and it had like taken me through this journey of kind of reclaiming that part of my story. And I've got a couple episodes on my podcast about like my writing journey and what going into detail. So if you're interested, you can go check that out. But I found it so interesting how it was after I'd done that reflection and kind of brought my creative self like back into, like integrated that back into who I am now, that this sort of all magically intertwined and came about. Because for me, this does kind of scoop up everything of me. So for so long, like my my soul-led business journey over like the last 6 years has been leading me to this. And it was like this had been kind of left behind, and now it got scooped up. It's like the last piece of the puzzle that was like, yes, you fit here, and now here is all of you. So yes, I've got a whole journey that's like playing out right now around that. But I'd love to hear, because I know you've said to me before that like when I DM'd you, you were like, holy crap, I literally just had the thought, I wonder if Kerryn would have space or be interested or whatever. So pick up from like before I DM'd you where you were at, and then carry us on.
Yeah. So when we, kind of talk about these things of setting these intentions out into the universe and trusting that we are supported and we are guided, and that our power of thought alone is so magical in that very intangible way, that I had got to that stage where I was thinking, okay, I know I'm at a point that I'm beginning to tie things up. I'm beginning to wrap things up. I feel like I've got, kind of the I'm nearing that point of completion. And that was when the thoughts started to come in of circling back to, okay, I put this concept to one side of editing. I put it over here. I put it on a shelf. I didn't worry about it while I was writing and going through the writing process of not letting that sort of stem my flow, so to speak. But now I'm at a point that I have to start seriously thinking about this. What is the next step going to be? Because while I know that a lot of my writing has been in flow and has been, channeled, has been whatever, along the way, it does need that eye of somebody else coming in and further refining and further kind of bringing that energy of curation to something. And this is the part that I think for so many creative people, whether they're artists, whether they're authors, whether they're writers, poets, even creative in the sense of producing something like, in the online space, whether that's teaching or podcasting or whatever, handing that over to someone else is a fucking terrifying process. And I know you know this feeling.
Yeah,
So
it's
well.
like, here's my baby. Please
Yeah.
tell me what's wrong with it. I
Yeah,
mean,
you're
who's in their
asking.
right mind? Like,
You're asking for like feedback. And that's
yeah,
terrifying, you know, because you're going, well, this is something I've poured my heart and soul into. Now, can you please tell me how it could be better?
yeah.
And I know that there's so many people who'll be watching this that will resonate with that, whether that's even from a level of something as small as jumping on, like, you know, Instagram stories or something and speaking to camera for the first time or something. You know, there's so many touch points and threads around that. Putting something out into the world and opening up to feedback is really that. I mean, it's like writing a book could pretty much just be called like a journey into shadow work.
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely.
And so really for me, I started to put that in, like, I guess, thought into, okay, in the perfect situation, how do I desire my editing process to be? How do I desire my book editing process to be? And that was when I started to think, I was like, well, what if there is someone who already knows my work, who already knows me, who already knows the way I operate, you know, in terms of like my business and my structure and the way I do things? Would there be someone out there already that has, you know, got that kind of skill set or expertise or capacity even? And that was really when the thought, you know, came to my mind of going, well, the person who I know, I can, you know, sort of feel that energy of curation and having that editing eye. Because at that point in our kind of friendship, we'd never really talked about your book journey that much.
No.
Right? Like we hadn't talked about your experience and expertise in that field. We talked a lot about your experience and expertise in terms of curating and refining and editing within people's businesses and their work flow and their lifestyle and working in harmony with, you know, their menstrual cycle and energetics and the path of ease and flow and all these beautiful things that you bring in like an editing role to people's lives and businesses.
Yeah.
And so for me, I was like, well, I know Kerryn does this for like other things. I wonder if there would be any way that she would bring that sort of energy to my book, even if it's just along the lines of like, you know, giving me some pointers of who to even talk to.
Yeah.
And then lo and behold, your DM arrived and I hadn't even said anything to you.
I know. I love that. Yeah, I love that you touch on that. And honestly, you through this process, you've been such an amazing like mirror for me. And it's just that projector site where you're like, by the way, this is what you do just in these other contexts. And it's so true. Like my business journey 6 years ago started with like system strategy and like looking at people's businesses and going, okay, you have this mess, you know, you have this raw first draft, like it's feeling really restrictive now because you don't know how to move within it. Like, let's move things around. Let's expand things here. Let's cut things here. Let's rearrange it to look like this. Let's you know, put some structure in place here so you don't have to hold that in your head. And, you know, that was even just the early days of my business when I was still in the like, you know, hard work and hustle and online business of, you know, let me find a mentor who'll tell me what to do and I'll be the best student ever. Like, and I was still doing this, like this, I've always done this. This is like that thread through someone's life of like, how do you know, what is that soul work? Coming back to the soulpreneur theme. And that's exactly it. Like I've always been able to take a look at a whole lot of something and like find the through line and put some shape to it. And I think one of the early things for me, you know, saying about giving over that draft and being like, can you help me make it better? I felt like I was really holding the vision with you. Like I could take that and say, okay, I know it's not the final result, but I have the vision of how good this can be. And like I can feel the energy of where you want this to go and how you want to take it. And in reading it, I was like, oh no, you need to add, like for you, it was all like expand this, more examples here, like just give us more of this. Because again, this is a book that I would have just bought, like, irrespective of being involved. As soon as I heard about the topic, I was like, yes, this is a book I need to buy and read. And so I had that, I think, reader perspective where I had that connection with what the book would end up being, like literally the book on the shelf behind you. Like, I had that vision and could hold that vision with you. So it really was less about, telling you what was wrong with it or what could go be better, and saying, like, we're holding this vision together, we're collaborating to get it to this point. Like, tell me if I've got the vision wrong, because this is your creative journey and you ultimately have the decisions and have the final say on things. But I can also see how this can become what you want it to. And let's get it that part of the way.
And that was so powerful for me, in that you had the ability to step into that space of going, I've got the vision with you. I wasn't having to sell you on my vision. I wasn't having to try and kind of like educate you on what I'm trying to write about, which I could imagine that if you work with, say, a big publishing house or an editor who is, kind of in a very, let's say, old paradigm setting, there's probably elements of, and we've talked about this, the hierarchical nature of that kind of old paradigm publishing industry, where the editor and the publisher basically dictate to you what you can and can't write in your book, and give you that kind of, no, this cannot happen, or you need to change course, or you need to change this. We need to be considerate of, marketing and sales and speaking to a particular niche, and all of these things that, for me, I knew from my experience of working within the traditional book publishing industry at that end of, book selling and things like that. I knew that that was so at odds with my vision for being an author. And to have you come in and be able to bring your knowledge of that old paradigm, but also to embrace the new paradigm and go, yeah, like we're on, like we're doing this, like this is happening.
Yeah.
Was
I
so
love how you
powerful
touch
for
on that
me.
too, because it's like, yes, I can hold the vision and I can help, like, guide and support, and let's get this to the vision. And at the same time, like, I'm asking you very specific stylistic questions about
Yeah.
commas and italics and semicolons. And I'm like, okay, yes, but also this random stuff from my past. Like, I know, I know these very detailed things I've not thought about in like 15 years.
And
And
I was like, I don't know, please tell me.
yeah. Yeah, and I think it's really important, thinking in contrast to that more traditional model, um, is that our relationship, and something that I needed to kind of shift into, having had a background with more being, aware of more traditional relationships and approaches to this, is like, it's your final say. It's like, I'm supporting you to birth this, and ultimate result is something that you want. So like, if that's how you want to use, grammar and styles and whatever, so long as I've educated you on the options and you've made an intuitive guided choice to, this is what I want, then even if that's personally not what I would choose, that doesn't matter, because it's like, I'm supporting you, and I don't have that, like, attachment within a publishing house where it's like my editor's name on the line, or I have to uphold the style of the publishing house, or we have to think about what might impact sales and the perception the publishing house has on what sells and what doesn't, and everything like that. And I think there was a part of the process where I was like, what if this book goes out and, like, there's something that's been missed? And it's like, what if there's a typo? What if there's something that's gone wrong? And for me, that brought up that, like, oh my gosh, that's going to be like a mark against, like, my editing. Which, by the way, it's not. But, like, that's something that came up through this process for me, where it's that old paradigm conditioning, and really leaning into, well, no, what is this new relationship we're building? And also, does it really matter? Like, there's so many books out there that have gone through even traditional publishing that have like one or two little things, and my crazy eye will pick them up when I'm reading a book. But like, it's fine. You just skim over. Like, if they're happening all the time, it can be a little disruptive and take you out of what you're reading. But the purpose is, yeah, to not let that like perfectionism stop you. And I think that is something that I think has in the past like made the editing process really slow and really long, is this back and forth of trying to make sure we don't miss anything. And it's like, sure, do your due diligence on it, but at the same time, we are working in a different way and in a different rhythm than in the past. And so it's really been a beautiful experience to lean into that and to see how an editing author relationship can be different and supportive for people who are for people like you and people like me eventually, who are writing books in this new paradigm way. And we're like, I choose a different experience. And to have people starting to come out of the woodwork like me, who's like, oh wait, I can do this. All of my whole journey's been pointing me towards this.
I'm really fucking excited about this, and holy shit. I've just uncovered a whole part of me that hadn't yet been expressed fully through my current like iteration of self and work and all of those things. What would you sort of say to someone who's maybe listening along to this or watching along to this, who has felt that kind of fear of essentially like judgment of their work and of that process of how an editor even works? Because I think that's something that for me as well, that was a big part of my learning about the journey of fears around perfectionism and feeling like I had to have something kind of like essentially like the final manuscript ready before I could even give it to an editor. And as I discovered, that's actually not how it fucking works, right?
No, absolutely. I mean, we can talk about the process that we kind of went through, because I think that's really important. Yeah, I think there were even parts of the book that that you knew still needed to be written that hadn't been done yet, but you had most of it there as we were sort of like, yes, we're in this, we're doing it. Because for me, like, I want to see the raw material. And it doesn't really matter if it's in the final structure. It doesn't matter if you can already see that these chapters don't really flow into these chapters. And I've kind of talked about the same topic in 3 places, but as the author, it's like, I've got all the pieces. I just don't know. I know they don't work in this way. There's something missing. They need to be rearranged, but I don't know how to rearrange it. Like, I don't know what that looks like, which is such my relationship with like graphic design. I can look at a graphic and I can tell you why I don't like it. I cannot solve the problem. I cannot like get to the point of like, oh, this is the graphic tweak. I need a graphic designer to do that. And so the thing that I actually really love this part, probably more than the like, detailed parts later on, is getting that raw material and being able to start to see that bigger picture and see how it all hangs together. And so along with making kind of like line edits and like scribbling in my beautiful like red digital stylus all over your manuscript, I was like keeping a running like outline for myself, and you hadn't provided me with one. I actually was like, don't do that, because I want to read it like a reader would and see where it flows and where it doesn't, see where I have questions about, oh wait, but what happens next here, or this doesn't quite feel complete. And so I think it's really important, no matter who you're working with as an editor, is to speak really openly with them about like, what are they expecting? And first of all, like you're saying, to know that you can actually get someone involved a lot earlier in the process than you may think. And they can help you with these kind of, structural questions, like, what shape does this look like? What parts? Like, you will have in your head, like, okay, here is the vision. Here's all the stuff I feel like I want to say already. but it doesn't feel right. There's something crunchy, there's something missing. I just can't identify it. And having that new set of eyes come in and look at it from that different perspective can give you a lot of clarity. And depending on where you are, because this can also be done like when you haven't written a lot of the book yet, like when you're at that idea phase, that concept phase, if you've got an outline or some of an outline, or you've started to pull together, like, I don't know, transcripts from podcast episodes or blog posts or in social media posts that you've written, you're like, I've got some stuff and it's kind of starting to take shape, but it feels really hard to move forward from this point. It's probably because you need some space cleared. You need that structure to come in just enough so that it frees you up to move forward.
Mm.
And so that's the part for me that's like super exciting, because I am able to see the pieces and how they will slot together to create that vision that we both have for it. And I think, yeah, that there's something that doesn't quite fit, but you don't know what that is or how to move things around. You might have even tried to move things around. This is like me with the graphics. I can fiddle around with it all day. Speak to one of my besties who's a graphic designer, and she's like, oh, you need to do that. And I'm just like, that took you 5 minutes, girl. Like,
Yeah.
I'm dying over here. So that's really, and that's the bigger chunk for me. Like, as far as like effort involved in the editing process, it's like, yes, you are reading a whole manuscript of a book. And I've also got this like beautiful picture in my head of like, okay, these pieces hang here and this piece is going to hang by itself for a while. And then, oh, I found the other pieces that can fit here. And it's like this beautiful puzzle that I can put together. But ultimately, I provide the options. Like, because we knew that our relationship was like divinely orchestrated, there was like a level of trust there. And right from the beginning, I think I said to you, like, I'm just going to give you everything that channels through. Like, the way that we this relationship came about, I feel like it would be doing you a disservice if I, couched my feedback or questioned my feedback. So I said sort of up front, like, anything that comes through, any suggestions, any ideas, I'm going to be the channel for that. But ultimately, everything is just a suggestion. Like, everything is an option that you have. It's an invitation for you to say, yes, I want to make that change to my book. It's going to bring me closer to my vision. Or no, it doesn't. And we need to find something else. And it's that collaboration of, what are the options? Is this getting us closer to the vision at that bigger picture level? It's like when you put the big rocks in first and then you put the little rocks and then the sand. It's that big rocks phase of how the whole piece hangs together.
Yeah, kind of the bones that are going to give it the divine masculine structure so that the feminine can flow with the words and the thoughts and the explorations and the teachable moments and all of those lovely things that is the writing part of it. But as you say, if it doesn't have that kind of curated eye of, this piece then flows really well into this, and then this, segues into this very nicely, and then it circles back to the illustration of the point or whatever, depending on how you're writing or your style of writing. And that was something I valued so much, was that you were giving me everything in terms of these are your options here, but you still have the creative control and you still have the creative autonomy to make those decisions about your book. Because that was, for me, something that before, in that stage of, oh my God, I don't know what I'm going to do about editing, I'm putting it on a shelf. That was one of my fears, was that someone would come in and basically tell me, no, this sucks. This doesn't work. Yeah. Don't do it like this. This isn't the way of writing, like all of those very old paradigm rules around, this is what a writer or an author should be like, or write like, or produce.
And I think that's the like old paradigm, like hierarchy relationship, right? Between an author and an editor. You had, the person writing, and then they would go get an agent, and the agent would then like curate them a little bit so they'd be saleable to the publishing houses. And then the editor would come in and would tell you what was wrong and what had to change so that you could get published. They were like a gatekeeper of quality around like, this sells, this doesn't, this is what we publish, this is not what we do. And so they were telling you, like, if you want to get published through us, like, you have
Yeah.
to be in this shape, you have to look like this.
Which inherently has so many flaws in that system, right? It's so laced in privilege and kind of myopic thinking and only telling the stories that appeal to the people in charge, basically, right? Like, or writing in the style that appeals.
Taking out the magic, taking out the stuff that actually needs to, the messages that need to reach people. It's like softening them down. And so I think that's the like conditioning or perspective we have on like, I'm an author and you're an editor, and that's what those labels have attached to them. So this has been really exciting for me to, I mean, we've just worked this out as we've gone. We had no idea at the start how this would work. But to redefine that relationship, and especially for me, being like, oh, hey, you mean I can do this thing where I get paid to read books? Like, that's cool. And it uses all my skills. Like, yes, please, and thank you. The reason why it uses all my skills is because we're doing it in this new paradigm way where like, I don't want you to give away your power. Like, I want to empower you to make those decisions and to, bring the book and the vision to life the way you want. And just like I've done through my life and business coaching, I want to open you up to all the possibilities and all the options so that you can, move forward and navigate the path that you want to choose.
And so much of it I found was like, so many of the little things were pretty much ironed out or resolved within the first like 5 minutes of us voice noting each other, like sending you through what I had and you pretty much just hitting me back with some questions around like, okay, stylistically, these are some choices we need to make, so that now it's like those decisions were made in like the space of 5 minutes, it felt like. And then that is like, that's that for the whole book. It's not these big things that have to be continually revised or reviewed or thought about or discussed. It's like, no, we're just making a decision now. Like, are we capitalizing this? Are we, italicizing this? Are we, how are we referring to this one thing so that it's the consistent same word, and those were all things that were so empowering for me to understand, so that it wasn't this massive big deal. It was like, it suddenly became like my nervous system could chill out and go like, oh, okay. So for now, the bits that I'm adding in or refining or tweaking, I know what I'm doing. Like, I know what those kind of things are that we've set in place stylistically throughout the book. So I'm away laughing. Like, I'm not having to figure it out. And that's also really powerful. Like when we talk about like our subconscious capacity and our nervous systems and all of these things that come into being able to produce our artistry and produce our craft. Because if we're frazzled and stressed out about like, oh my God, what do they think about it? Like, am I doing it wrong? That's limiting our soul expression at the end of it.
It's limiting that creative flow that you're trying to like sit down and channel like on a very regular basis. And to be able to, clear that up early. It's actually, you talking just now made me think like, this is such a great thing that could be tackled again earlier in the process. This is again an option for you to lean into. You can do it whenever you like. But it was something where I didn't have to read a lot of the manuscript to be like, okay, we need to make some decisions here, like stylistically, which way are we going? What are we doing here? And you're right, there were a handful of things that then for me as the editor doing it at that point in time, I knew what to mark up. I could go through the manuscript then and be like, we've made the decision to do it this way. This is not that way. Let's just mark it so it can be changed. But if you're starting and you're, the grammar and the language and this kind of detail is something that really, like, thank you, loud truck outside my window. And this sort of stuff is really hampering your creative flow. And this is something that's, coming up, that perfectionism, it's weighing on your mind and it's stopping you from moving forward. If you've got like a chapter done or a few pages done, like this is something that I or another editor that works in this kind of new paradigm way could look through for you and say, okay, like these are the decisions that need to be made. And
Mm,
then you can carry those decisions right through writing the rest of the book,
mm.
feeling like with your nervous system, like chilled out. It's like, no, you've got this. Or even, I bet for so many people, it would even be someone looking at it and being like, you actually, it's all fine.
Yeah, yeah,
Actually, you're doing it correct. And there's like, grammatically correct, right?
yeah.
Or actually, there's just this one thing I noticed, but all these things you were concerned about, like that's totally a legitimate option. Again, there's not
Mm.
like one right way. It's like, is that how you want to do it? You could do it these two other ways, but if they don't feel good and that's the way that you naturally talk and you naturally write, then like I will give you the permission slip if you need one.
Yeah, and you can guarantee that there are going to be people out there who resonate with that, because everyone's way of reading and enjoying books and enjoying learning or expanding their minds or whatever comes in a different way. And if anything, it will be accessible for the people who resonate with that. And I think that's something that kind of circles back to that point about, the old paradigm rules around writing and book publishing were set by people who that worked for them. That style of writing worked for them. That style of, grammar and sentence structure and paragraphs and whatever, but there are always going to be people who break new ground and are evolving the art form. And I always like to kind of remind myself whenever I have these self-doubt moments of like, go back in history to like some of our most famous artists and painters. And at the time that they were, you had your expressionists and you had your cubists and you had your, people who were radically shaking up the art world. And these are people now that are revered and celebrated and studied. But at the time, the who's who of the art world were telling them they were shit.
Like looking at their
Yeah.
canvases going like, what have you done here?
Yeah, like you have not painted it in this classical style. Like, what have you done to the bowl of fruit on the table? kind of thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I think that that's such a permission slip for people, as you say, to it, even if you're just wanting to ask some questions about starting out writing and get your kind of flow, like there's all these ways that someone like yourself can support people through that, because as you say, that then might free up the creativity to actually be able to go on to the point of writing 30, 40, 50, 60,000 words. Because if you are struggling to navigate like putting a couple of thousand words together because you're so held back, or like the perfectionist is coming in and micromanaging those words on the page, it makes writing over the long haul really fucking hard.
Absolutely. And again, everything that I do comes back to like, what experience do you want to have? You can absolutely write your like 40, 50, 60,000 words feeling like that with the perfectionism like on your back, and you can write a book like that. It came up for me when I was reading The Sound of Paper by Julia Cameron again, where the kind of coaching and mentoring that happened for creatives, probably still now, but also not that long ago, was, this is the experience. You have your inner critic, you have your self-doubt, you have your perfectionist, and this is how to do it with them alongside you. This is how to do it anyway. And it's going to feel like that. And you have to choose to ignore them. But there was no approach that said, this is how you minimize their impact. This is how you take them off your shoulders and stick them in a corner. This is where you say, it's my writing time now, and leave them outside the room.
You give them some snacks and like put them in front of
Yeah,
Netflix.
there's exactly like, can we just treat them like small children? Stick Netflix on with some snacks and let mummy do her business call for right now. Like all of the coaching and mentoring, and when there's all of this information out there about the creative journey, whether you're a writer or an artist or whatever you're creating, it was always this assumption that they're always going to be there. And doesn't have to be true. And so for me, coming through this new paradigm way and reading about this, I was like, but exactly like we're saying, what if we could like disable the perfectionist like right at the beginning, and then they're off your back and they're like bugging you about how you're writing and not keeping your house clean, right? Like that they've had to go find a different thing to deal with because this has been soothed, like this has been disabled. And so I feel like just right through the creative journey, there's this ability, like you say, shadow work freaking central. We can work through these things so that we create the experience that is better than we could imagine in writing a book. I know for me, like I will be writing books, and the idea of taking the thing that like lights me up, my like dream of it is like taking 6 months where I can just, that's the like primary thing, and I can have that ritual and I can like meet myself at the page, and it's just this delicious experience. I'm not having to slog through something to get to the final draft because the only goal is publishing the book out the other side and holding the physical copy in my hands. I'm like, no, I want the whole experience to be so freaking enjoyable and so delicious. And I know that like you've created a lot of that for yourself through your journey writing Soulpreneur, you know, working with Laz and having that support, and having me come in and be able to, you know, hold space for working in a different way, which is going to segue us further into our conversation, so we don't stay here all day, about like how we actually, like I did my editing thing, sure, but like you talked about, we voice messaged on Voxer, and I was like, okay, before I get further into this manuscript, like, how do you want to deal with this? How do you want to deal with that? And then once I had done all of that and I had all this feedback for you, me as the sacral generator was like, so hey, do you want to go jump on Zoom and workshop?
And me as the mental projector went, oh my God.
I want to vomit, and no freaking way.
Let me just think about it. And yeah, this was the, I guess, again, like the beauty of that emotional intelligence that came through within our dynamic in our relationship that I so appreciated, because I felt like I could come to you and say, well, actually, for me, I process things better if I'm able to kind of have it, say, recorded for me, and then we can just voice note backwards and forwards, because I need that time to go away and to process. And I don't thrive on that kind of, we need to make a decision while we're here on the Zoom call and things like that. And so for you to be open to working in a way that worked for me was just like the most magical dream scenario, because you were able to essentially present it and share it in a way that worked for you. Like you were able to use your responding strategy and like go through that kind of more generator vibe of like, you know, kind of almost like it wasn't quite working through line by line, but it was working through kind of a kind of a reasonable chunk of chapters, let's call them, like in one go. And then kind of giving me the notes and things in a recorded context. And then I think like literally I was able to then watch your video in like bits and pieces. And I think there was times when I was like, you know, listening to it while I was like walking on my treadmill. And so I was able to use that kind of movement to help process, because it was big feelings for me the first time round of getting that feedback. So for me, it really helped me to be able to process in a way that moved those emotions, and I was able to stay in that state of like, yeah, this is just feedback and options, and it's not anything about the quality of my work or the worth of my work or the, you know, the value of this book. It's just literally options that are going to help me make it better. And so being able to access, it's like, it comes back to the conversation of accessibility, right? Like in terms of not having to try and do it in a way that probably, again, in old paradigm traditional publishing, you might have had to go in and sit down in a meeting with your editor face to face and basically have your manuscript like pulled apart in front of you. And like for me,
like, you've murdered my child. Look at all the red pen all over these pages. Like,
and for so many people, they need that spaciousness to go away and make an aligned decision. And actually that pressure cooker of like being in a, like you have to decide right now environment. For some people that works and that produces the best. And for a lot of people, it's going to lead to, some decisions might be quite obvious, but for the vast majority, like it's going to be somehow misaligned, because it's like you're having to jump into something before your like energetic body, your emotional body, all of these things have had time to process in a way that feels good for you. And then being able to bounce backwards and forwards with voice notes for me was like the perfect situation, because it's like we could get through stuff in the space of like a 2-minute voice note and really make progress forward. And then, like that for me just was so magical to be able to do that. And just gave us both, because I mean, your life and your business is very much founded on those values of your life, your family, your enjoyment, your fun, like are all the priority values in your life. And then the business works around that or wraps around that. And like, we were talking about the fact, that you would voice note me and you're like, I'm lying in the sun with your book. Like, this is the dream, right? And this is the thing, is like, for me, knowing that was feeling so good for you as well just made the whole experience so much more powerful.
Absolutely. I know, I remember sharing, because I was updating the Soulpreneur highlight that I have on my Instagram, which, I mean, you should just go look at it, because you'll see it from my perspective, like
editing process.
But it was literally like, what is better than lying in the sun reading a book? Lying in the sun editing a book. What would be better than that? Lying in the sun editing a book and getting paid for it. It was just like, it's like, I would do this, I would lie in the sun and read a book anyway. And this for me, again, because it's skills I've developed, but the way that I have sort of a natural view of the world, like it wasn't effort, it didn't feel hard, and so it was amazing. But I want to come back to that way of working, because I think even as a sacral generator, like literally the human design that you can ask me a direct yes no question and I will tell you yes or no, I think going through a process like this, there's a difference between responding in an aligned way and reacting. And like you said, there's such it's such a journey to receive feedback. And I think it's really sort of emotionally intelligent of us to create space to allow for that to come up. Like, okay, I'm going to have reactions, I'm going to have emotions that I need to work through, and then let's come back and make the decision. Let's come back and connect.
My inner child is just going to go have a freak out for a moment.
So we've had a tantrum. We've freaked out and run to our bedroom crying. Okay, now we're feeling better. We've had a cuddle, and what's actually happening now? And I know that I messaged you quite often after I'd sent you feedback. I'm like, how are you feeling? What's going on for you? Can you please like give me a temperature of the like emotional landscape right now? And beautifully you had the support from Laz, so that maybe you could speak a little bit to that, because it's definitely something that as an editor with my kind of background, like that, like I said, that's my follow-up. I'm like, here's my like unfiltered channeled feedback, and I understand that when you read this you are probably going to have like some reactions, so let's hold space, let's work through them. But I'd be interested, like you had a different person, so it was like an independent person from the person giving the feedback. I'm just curious as to whether you think that felt different, but also I think how you worked with the two of us through that time.
Well, it was something I knew, that as someone who is so kind of energetically open and empathic and all of the things, like highly sensitive life, that it was really powerful for me to know I had not only the curating support, but also the essentially like emotional support of the journey of writing a book. And what that meant is that, I had not only our space where you've got that gift of going, hey, I'm aware of this entire process. I'm aware of how this feels. I've been on both sides of the coin. I've been, you've supported clients through these sorts of journeys, whether that's been book or business related. Like, there's needs around that emotional and energetic space to be held for processing and feedback and all of those things. And then also having someone that was kind of there throughout the whole process. So it was like almost being able to know that we had navigated a lot of the big emotions of who am I to write, who am I to do this, all of those kind of things that if I hadn't have had that foundation, I think the editing process could have potentially brought up a lot more for me. But because I'd already navigated so much
really
of that,
interesting. Yeah.
you know, I'd already spent a good 6 months navigating all of those feelings on my own, you know, not on my own, but with that support, but in that solo space of writing. So when it came to the editing process, I was like, well, no, I've got that. Like, I know how to navigate feeling unworthy, feeling like, oh my God, like who's going to read this? Who's like, this sucks. Everything sucks. I suck. Like, you know, all of those feelings.
And you'd already built up sort of more trust with yourself, and you'd already integrated into your identity more of that, yes, I am a writer, yes, I am an author. So when it came to having your work like critiqued and feedback, you had a stronger foundation to kind of go into that experience.
And learning as well, like so much of and if you haven't caught the day one part of this talk, like definitely worth going back and checking out with Laz of Walnut Wednesday, and Kerryn has her beautiful Walnut Wednesday mug as well.
Just a little bit of Laz with us today.
That we talked a lot about how, for me, learning how to celebrate the mini things and learning how to celebrate along the way has been a big part of that process of that emotional journey of writing a book. And in many ways, we then were able to talk about that I was like, yeah, of course, like I'm celebrating the fact I'm getting feedback. I'm celebrating the fact that I'm getting this curated eye looking at my work. I'm choosing to celebrate this moment because this is like stepping into that next level of authorship. This is stepping into that highest potential timeline of, you know, what this book could be, where it could go, who it's going to serve, and choosing to reframe that and see it as something to celebrate rather than probably what so many of us have been conditioned to believe from a young age is that, you know, if you haven't done it perfectly the first time, there is something wrong with you and you're a failure and you should know all this already. And no, that's not the case. And much like we talked about before, that is why we have people like you that come in and do what you do, because, you know, the author or the writer doesn't need to have to hold all of that information around structure and, you know, formatting and like stylistic things, because that's why we get the outside perspective to give us that, much like you say, like getting in a graphic designer rather than trying to sit there for hours trying to figure out the components of graphic design, when you can give them the raw like idea or vision and imagery and colors and, you know, this is the concept. Now, like, let's zhuzh it up and like make it come to life in that way. So I really love that. And I think that that's such an important part of it and such a powerful way that you bring all of you to this kind of work, because you have that ability to look at it kind of like you were touching on before, going like, let's create an experience around writing. Let's create something that is going to support you to be at your best when you're writing. And that, again, is also where your skill set lies as someone who literally helps people, you know, kind of curate their business or curate their product suite or whatever that might be, which I think is also something that a lot of people are going to find huge value in understanding, that you can be an author and also like run a very successsiul business on this, you know, simultaneously, or have these other things that support your authorship. I don't know if that like is anything.
No, absolutely. I have like my brain is doing its thing where it's dropping in the like bigger picture pieces, because just as we've been talking about with the book, like no matter what your vision is, whether it's the vision for a book or another creative output, you know, creative being, whether that's your business, whether that's your lifestyle, you have a vision for that, and you have where you are now, and you're like, how just how So one of the things, like we've already touched on, I am like, part of my purpose is helping us all create the experience of life that we want right now and not having to wait for a certain point. Like the experience of writing the book, of going through the editing process, of going through like the launch and the publishing. Like, how do we make the experience of what we're doing, this creative journey, to be so fun and so enjoyable for us? And then also, naturally, to get from where we are now to the vision, and to get through the like how I don't know, we are going to be challenged, and we are going to need to grow, and there's going to be like emotional stuff that comes up. And the actual how is to make aligned decisions for us as the individual, living the life, birthing the book, growing the business. And so no matter whether it is book, life, business, it's all about, how do we create that experience? What is the aligned decision for you? Like, what's the path where you feel the clearest energy? What do we have to clear out of the way? What perspective do we have to shift? What do we need to like release our grip on so we can let it go? How do we need to connect more with the vision to believe it's possible for us? And like, that's what's going to bridge the gap. And those are all of the things that I've been doing for years with life and business. And to be able to bring that approach, I often say it's not what you do, it's how you do it. And it's bringing that approach to how we do life, how we create books, how we grow businesses. That's really what I'm excited about with, you know, the book landscape, like clicking into place for me, is doing that in that context for, oh my gosh, bringing amazing books out into the world, when for so long there's been such a bias out on the bookstore shelves of, you know, men and old paradigm perspectives. And it's like, we got to get more of us incredible soulpreneur, you know, women and people from different cultures and perspectives, with books out there to show that there is another way. Just like this is another way to have an experience creating and writing and going through the editing process to birth a book.
And something, as you were just saying, that came to mind around that there are so many people, like you say, soulpreneurs and women particularly, who have got powerful stories to share, or have got impactful stories within them that are needing to be shared in a way that other people can read about them. And they might not identify as a writer. And I think that's something powerful as well, to acknowledge that people can come to someone like you, and you've got the way of helping turn that dream into a reality that supports someone who maybe goes, I've never written anything before, but I know I've got a book inside of me. How do I make that happen? Or, you know, I've got this story I want to tell and to share, but I've got these fears or these self-judgments or whatever around doing that. And I think that, you know, that's something that you are so powerful at, being able to hold that space for people, but also give, like, you've got the how, like you don't have to figure it out for yourself, basically.
Oh my gosh. I mean, through my years of writing, and also when I was very much in that productivity hack, like how do I get myself to sit down? And I participated often in National Novel Writing Month, which I think still happens in November. I started my first blog in 2005. That is a lot of years ago, when I first did National Novel Writing Month. And you have the goal is to write 50,000 words in 30 days. Which is 1,667 words a day. I can still tell you at the top of my head. So like I know all of the hacks to sit down and to write the words and to get that much like output. But at the same time, I think you touched on this with Les in her conversation, like sitting down and typing on a blank page is not the only way to write a book. And it's not even the way that a lot of the books on the bookshelves have been written. Like, you know, you may have heard like about ghost writers, where they essentially sit and have conversations with the author, but they're the ones doing the actual writing of the story that's being told to them. And there's so many ways, especially if you know, someone is an online business or they are a creative that they have been creating, like whether that's podcasts or YouTube videos or social media posts or blog posts, we have already written / said thousands of words.
Yeah.
I did this for myself recently, which
You
blew
did.
my
Yeah, I
mind.
love this. Yeah.
Yeah. So I actually, well, first of all, I copied and pasted a whole series of of social media posts that I'd written over a certain period of time along this topic of like, you know, connecting with your intuition and leading from that place. I can't remember the exact word count, but it was pages, pages and pages and pages. And then I took the transcript from one of my podcast episodes, which is like 40 minutes long about, and it was, I don't want to exaggerate. I feel like it was like 4,000 words. It was like, we'll say 2,000 to 4,000 just to be a bit conservative. But I'm just like, oh, I'm sorry, what now? Like 40 minutes of speaking has just turned into like, say, 2,000 conservatively words. Like it would take me at least 2 hours when I was like, I could write like stream of consciousness like 500 words in about half an hour. So
Yeah.
like best case scenario, that's taking me 2 hours to write. And I don't know that I can keep that pace up for 2 whole hours.
Yeah.
So there's just so much we've probably already said about what we want to birth into a book that we don't have to start with a blank page. And sometimes that can be a way to really connect us with the vision we have, is to read or listen to or to tap in whatever way to the message we're already sharing that we want to now put into this other form.
And also that, again, going back to these, you know, permission slips around structure and what a book actually contains, that there are so many examples of books coming out now that they can be as simple as some, you know, a series of short affirmations or journeys or moments. Like it does not have to be in the structure of chapter that is like, you know, I don't know, 10-15 pages.
It's all well researched and has scientific evidence and is all backed up with like, I've interviewed 100 people who achieved this thing. Yeah. We don't, that's one option if that, you know, if that lights you up and gets you really excited. If it doesn't, like, that's cool too.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's something that is so beautiful, because exactly like you say, that there is always going to be a community out there who need the information or the wisdom or the inspiration in a way that they enjoy, you know, receiving it. And there are some people who love nothing more than sitting down with a big fat book and like reading from cover to cover. And then there are plenty of people who enjoy diving in and out of something in a non-linear fashion, or, you know, reading a page, reading a paragraph. And that is the sort of amount that they consume in one go. So I just, think there's so much beautiful potential there. And it makes me so happy to know that there are people like you, soulpreneur women like you out there that are supporting this process. So I know we could continue talking about this for so long. Like we've got so much.
I feel like we've done so well to cover so much of what we wanted to.
We've covered a lot of ground. So what I do want to make sure we talk about is that for if anyone's coming away from this conversation feeling like, oh my God, tell me more about how this can start to happen for me in my life. Can you share about a little bit in terms of what you are currently offering? I know things are kind of going to obviously evolve over time depending on when people listen to this or watch this in the future. But as of, you know, if you want to share a little bit around the types of support you have for this type of work, how people can get in touch with you, how they can kind of like come and be like, oh my God, Kerryn, I'm so inspired. I've got this idea. Where do I go from here?
Oh my gosh. First of all, if that's you, like, I want to heir from you because it's so freaking exciting. I get super excited. It's like when I do my life and business coaching and people come to me with their business, like they're maxed out. And I just get so excited because I'm like, I know how to fix this problem and then you'll be here. So I'm already excited about here. You're not. You're not. This is not your experience. But like, I'm really excited. So Yes, I do have editing services now, thanks to this amazing divine, experience. And the easiest way to get in touch with me is probably like DM me on Instagram at Kerryn Hewson, or you can drop me an email if Instagram's not your thing, Kerryn at kerrynhewson.com, and just reach out. What I love to do in the first instance is just to voice message with you and hear about what's going on. Some of the ways, I mean, I think we've touched on quite a few like fun ways of like parts of the process that there is support available if you desire it. If there's if you want to, choose a different experience and support really feels like, oh, that would be amazing. That would make this so much easier. That like your nervous system like relaxes at the thought. There's so many different places you can be supported in. So like, don't limit yourself, simply ask. This is what I tell my children: ask for what you want.
Yeah.
So I'm definitely available for like one-off sessions. If you want to be like, this is where I'm at, this is all the stuff that's coming up, like let's just have a call and kind of clear things for where you are to help you shift forward. If you would like me to be your book editor, I would love to hear about your project. For me, I want to be working on projects that I can hold the vision with you. So that's going to be a thing where it's like, if you think I'm the right person for you, like, let's find out if that's the right fit. And probably if you're feeling that way, it is.
Yeah.
But just like I've been loving this book launch process and sharing and supporting, like, I want to really partner with you on the process, on the journey, and be such a champion for the book. So it really does need to be, something that I'm like, oh my God, I would buy this anyway. That's like my internal, like, little temperature gauge. So one-off sessions, book editing, and then also, we've talked about the editing, but also, the like coaching and support through the process from that perspective of, getting your butt in the chair if that's what you need to do, like the shadow work journey, the emotional intelligence, like support through reacting and then making that aligned decision. That's all coaching and mentoring that I do through business and through life. So that's also something that I would be interested in talking to people about if that's the kind of support that you want. And this conversation has completely like lit you up.
I know. And it's so powerful that you've got that capacity to be able to offer, it's meeting you where you're at as an author or an aspiring author or a writer. And then also you get to, exactly like you say, you get to put it out there to say, this is what I desire. Now let's have a look at how best that might come about or make it happen. Because I know you've already had this sort of experience of people reaching out to you saying, I've got something, it's coming. Like it is going to be coming. So
oh my gosh,
even if
so
you're,
exciting.
I just want to kind of gives people watching or listening the permission slip that even if you don't know when, like make sure you come and talk to Kerryn like now, because that's going to get you at least on a wait list for the future, in terms of when it is the right timing for you. Or it might be that one-off conversation, like, an hour, 90 minutes, whatever it is going to give you that perspective around, oh, okay, it might not be that it happens right now, but it might happen in 6 months' time or whatever the case may be. So, don't sit there quietly waiting until you think you've got it all sorted out. Like you can have those conversations now, even before you've written a single word on the page. But if you know that it's there and it's bubbling away and it's brewing away, like,
I think if our story of like me reaching out and randomly DMing you is like a lesson for anything, it's like if you've had that kind of reaction to the thought of, oh my gosh, there is a book in me, or I've started writing, or I put the question of an editor on the shelf like Rose did, and now this has me wondering, like, what if like you're the right fit? Then like act on the urge for sure.
Yeah. 100%. So, my love, thank you so much for coming and joining me for this conversation. I am so grateful for you. I am so just in awe of your magic. And I feel so lucky that this came about at this journey. And of course, it happened with a book named Soulpreneur, that it was part
Of
of the
course it
bigger
did.
journey for both of us as we were, not only navigating our own journeys as soulpreneurs. So thank you for coming and sharing your wisdom and your magic. And of course, we will pop all the links in with this so that if you want to know where to go, if you want to reach out, Kerryn's details are going to be in the comments below, so you can check that out. Thank you, my love.
You're
and
welcome. And
can't
where
wait
can
to keep.
people get the book? If
Oh,
they
that'll
haven't
be
already.
in the links as well. So at the moment
Yay.
it's out now, and you can get hold of your copy through places, all the places online. So particularly, like the Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Book Depository, all the things. So there's a link in with the comments as well as to where you can get hold of your copy of the book. It's very exciting. It's very exciting. Thank you. And we will no doubt be having another conversation at some time in the future. So
Sure, we will.
to follow along on the journey. And thank you for joining us, Goddess.
Thank you.